What's going on? I'm Jacob. Today I had the privilege of speaking with an absolute legend by the name of Keith Fuller. He was a game developer for a long time. For the past 15 years, he's been doing game dev coaching and consulting, and he has even written his own book, Beyond Critical: Improving Leadership in Game Development, which is a pretty cool book. I liked it a lot. He was gracious enough to agree to do an interview with me, and I'm very grateful for that. I just do want to let you know before we get into it that I am not the most tech savvy person. I am working on those skills, and hopefully they will get better as I go. Um, with that being said, I did learn something making this. I should have recorded his audio and mine separately. I did not do that. In the playback, his audio was delayed by a second or so. I did my best to sync up his voice with the video, which means my voice is actually now early by a second or so. So even though it does seem like I am sometimes cutting him off before a sentence is over, and sometimes he sounds like he's waiting an awkwardly long amount of time before responding to me. That's really just poor technical skills on my part. Hopefully they'll get better. I even sometimes just wasn't talking at the microphone like I should have been. So I've learned some things. Hopefully my mistakes don't detract too much from this video. Honestly, I thought I was gonna mess it up more than I did, so I'm happy with how it turned out, and I hope you get as much enjoyment out of the interview as I did. So without further ado, here's Keith.
You're in charge here. It's your show. What do we do? What can I help you with?
Well, we got to introduce you first. And real quick, before I do that, I had a question. Are you familiar with your biography on MobyGames.com?
So Moby Games is widely regarded in the games industry as pretty much just a random series of words
Yeah.
with little to no bearing on anybody's actual career. So I
Okay.
haven't not read it in a while, but the last time I did, it was kind of funny.
Um, should I read it and we can get your comments on it?
Sure.
All
Yeah.
right.
We'll do like a PolitiFact truthometer on it and see how accurate it is.
I genuinely gleamed over this the first time because I didn't think it was you. The beginning goes, Keith was raised in the steppes of northern Mongolia and taught computer programming by a blind paraplegic who admitted that he was just guessing. He put
Accurate.
those he put those dubiously earned skills to use on Raven titles such as Soldier of Fortune, Star Trek Voyager, Elite Force, and Soldier of Fortune 2. Keith has an affinity for most things science fiction and all things Isaac Asimov or William Gibson, volleyball, and extremes of heat. Oh, and best wife ever. Did your wife write this?
No, I think of her own volition has little to do with my career. Um, I can remember writing that probably in like 2002,
Oh, you wrote this.
2003, something like that. I did. And mainly, I thought it was hilarious that there was no adult in the room. Like you could just type anything. Like I could say I invented Microsoft or whatever. Like there's no there are no guardrails whatsoever. So I was basically just typing whatever I wanted to and then hit submit and oh hey, that worked. So here we are.
That's great. That's very cool. So what got you into game development? Was it something you kind of actively pursued, or you became a programmer and then fell into it?
I made my first video game, if you can call it that. It was pretty simple. When I was maybe 13 on an Atari 800 XL home computer, maybe 64K of RAM, had I to guess. And I was kind of smitten at that point. I had played video games a lot, and when I found out that you can make them, that was just astounding to me. So I spent an inordinate amount of time in college just puttering around trying to figure out what I wanted, and eventually landed on a computer science degree. And the first paid gig I got after graduating was at a tiny mom and pop game company here in Madison, Wisconsin, that never shipped a game. And that was my introduction to the games industry.
Okay. And you got to tell us about your first game. What kind of was it? A platformer? What was that you made?
It was kind of a knockoff of a Star Wars X-Wing game that
Okay.
you could play in the arcade. And so you had lasers that would shoot at a target from all four corners of the screen, and it would just show up a random target, and you had to use a joystick to move the crosshairs over the target. So it was pretty simple, but that was it.
Well, that's still really cool. You said you were 13?
Yes, I believe so.
That's
That was
really
a long time ago, so the numbers I'm rounding perhaps.
and you said you were a game. Are you still a gamer?
I play games. They are different than the ones that I would have been playing when I was a fingers on keyboard developer.
Hmm.
So when I worked at Raven, for instance, you're surrounded by dev kits and you use high-end PCs all the time. And so you can play anything you want in your lunch hour or after hours or whatever. And so I would play more core platform type things. So bigger budgets, console, PC, those sorts of things. Now, fast forward decades later, and I've got family and all these other obligations. So the things that I play are much snackier. So it's usual mobile games or something like that that can fit in between everything else that's going on, but still play games.
Very cool. Very cool. Um, so this mom and pop place that was Raven, and now it's not a mom and pop place, or that was somewhere before that was before Raven.
No, this was before Raven.
Okay.
This was a place called Evermore Entertainment. And it literally shared a parking lot with Raven.
Oh wow.
So my understanding is the man who started Evermore used to be a partner at Raven, and they had some sort of a falling out, and he basically said, "Oh, fine, I'll start my own studio." And so I worked at the place he started, Evermore Entertainment, and that took in all of us who didn't have extensive experience or really impressive degrees, but still wanted to make games and would do it on the cheap. They took us in. And so we had 11 or 12 of us um, that either had no experience or little experience in game development. And it essentially acted as a farm team for Raven for many, many people because, I mean, it's 100 yards
Yeah.
away. So you get some experience at Evermore and you go, oh, wait, this is kind of not as exciting as I was hoping. Oh, hey, look, Raven. And so then you would take a long lunch one day and interview at Raven, and then you'd wind up shifting employment. And I went that route as well as several other people I know.
Okay. And so, what was the first game that you worked on with Raven?
The first game was the original Soldier of Fortune, and I had come into that probably around alpha or something. We shortly after I joined, we had just gotten to the point where we had interactive NPC models in the game. So in other words, hey, look, it's a first person shooter. You have a weapon, and now you have bad guys that you can shoot and do damage to. And we were also enthralled with that. So I started roughly halfway through development, something like that. And I still have the bottle of champagne that Activision sent us and a copy of the press release when Soldier Fortune went gold, and a couple of copies of different versions of it up on my shelf here.
That's very cool. That's very. I think I saw in a interview. I think you did with some of the IGN guys. I think it was. Maybe.
Could
I
be.
think you said you did like the code to make when you shoot the trash can, the lid flips over.
Yes, I mean when I joined Raven, and this was hilarious. My thought was, oh, now I've made it. I'm in the big leagues. This is big budget game development stuff. I'm now a rock star. When I started at Raven, nobody knew I started. Nobody knew I'd been hired. I went around to the three different programming leads for the different projects we had going on. None of them knew I was coming. None of them knew who I was, and none of them wanted me on their team. And so when I finally did land a spot on Soldier of Fortune, it was basically what is the lowest rung stuff that we need a programmer to do? Let's put the new guy on it. And so the system that we had at the time, our tech lead invented the system called Ghoul, which had, and this is revolutionary for the time. It was per pixel, per texel, really, hit detection. So it wasn't just you're shooting a giant bounding box that covers the bad guy. You can shoot his wrist.
Oh.
You can shoot his kneecap. And so there are all sorts of different animations and gory bits that ensue as a result of this. One of the other aspects of Ghoul meant that you could shoot parts on the models that are littering the environment. So you could shoot the leg off of a fruit stand and the table collapses and the oranges go rolling down the street, or you could shoot the lid on a trash can and it would flip around. And so my earliest recollection was doing all those sorts of things for the gameplay.
Well, that's very cool. That is very cool. I feel like that stuff probably would get taken for granted in these days, but that seems like it would have been kind of new and I don't know, maybe probably a lot more difficult to accomplish back then, I would assume.
This was in the era where if anything interacted in the environment, and that was fairly rare, but if anything in the environment was something you could interact with, it would keep the same model, but just switch to a damaged texture. So like if you shoot something that looks like a window, it would just switch the texture to a broken glass texture. And that's it. Like that's the excitement level that you have of interacting with the environment. And it was pretty rare that you could do any of that. When Duke Nukem came along and you could do things like shoot toilets and water would spurt out of the wall, people thought that was just amazing. Could games get any better? So the fact that we had trash can lids that would flip around was bordering on revolution.
That's really cool. And so when X-Men Legends happened, you also joined that one like halfway through production? Give or take?
Yes. I think I had finished up I think I had finished up working on Voyager, Elite Force, and then maybe I was doing some cinematic help on one of our Star Trek or Star Wars games. And then got switched over, as many people were at the time, to X-Men Legends, because this was our first cross-platform title. Everything we had done before that was just going on PC. And this was the first game where we were simultaneously developing it for Xbox Classic, the very first Xbox, PlayStation 2, and Nintendo GameCube. So the needs of this technology and the scope of the game meant that we had a much larger team than we had in the past, and it just kind of kept accreting people like a black hole. So I was one of the people that got sucked in, and originally I had joined the team as, again, sort of, oh, this guy does programming. What does he do? Nothing exciting. Okay, well then let's put him on. I think I was making dialogue boxes show up for in-game conversations with NPCs.
Yeah. Was it you were kind of happy to be like moving over and getting to work on an X-Men game, or it was kind of like, well.
X-Men Classics were probably the first comic books that I ever seriously tried to collect. Like every time they would come out at the store, I would rush over there and buy one. So the X-Men characters I had always been a fan of. And this, of course, is before any of the movies, right? So being able to work on an X-Men game is the next best thing to being asked to write one of the comics, right? Like, this is amazing. So I was familiar with the universe, familiar with all the characters, and it was shaping up. Even when I joined, it was eminently playable, and you could just jump in and have fun right away. So yeah, I was definitely gung ho.
That's really cool. So then, who is your favorite X-Man?
I would probably still stick with, and this goes back like, well, decades now at this point. I always liked Wolverine. And this goes back kind of obviously before any of the movies, before he had kind of grittier backstories and more kind of anti-hero noir kind of aspects to him. I was always drawn to the fact that he was he wasn't a Boy Scout like Cyclops, um, and he would mouth off to people, but they still respected his abilities, and so they kept him on the team. And I mean, it doesn't hurt that he can't be hurt. So that was yes, Wolverine probably still my favorite.
100%. That is also my favorite character. He and Captain America have kind of always been tied as like my two favorites. Um, yeah, Captain America almost kind of because he's the Boy Scout, and then Wolverine because he's just awesome. He's just cool.
You can barely see like the third of the poster over here. That's a poster a friend of mine got me when I first moved to Wisconsin. And that is Captain America fighting
That is
Wolverine.
cool. That is really cool. I've got it's really small. You might probably can't see it. A tiny little
I
Wolverine
got
up
him.
here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Got the brown and yellow. Sure.
I love that costume. Um, so Legends 2 happens, and you become a design lead, and you were a design lead on Ultimate Alliance as well, or the design lead.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. Well, and so I have to clarify this because the title distinction actually matters in this case. So design manager was the title they gave me. And it was out of necessity because they had lead designers on past projects, right? And that was essentially it's the project. It's very pyramidal, very functional system of organization for each project. You'd have a project lead, and he talks to all of the discipline leads. Um, so the audio and design and animation and programming, all these people. So you'd have a lead designer. That's the person who's getting direction generally from the project lead and maybe the art lead, and then goes and tells the designers, hey, here are the maps we're building. Well, I wasn't a designer. I was a programmer. But the situation was, okay, so we had shipped, I'll back up a little bit more. When I finished Soldier of Fortune 2, we had kind of a wrap up lunch for everybody who'd been on the team. And 25 people showed up, and we had no idea where they all came from. Really? We had 25 people work on this project? It doesn't seem like we had that many. That's an enormous team. 25 people. And now, in the year of our Lord 2025, thousands of people work on AAA games. But back then, 25 was huge. Okay, so then when we finished X-Men Legends and we started on Legends 2, we kind of looked around and said, oh, we have a 90-person team. And 10 of them were level designers because it was a very content-heavy game, just churning out all these maps. So they looked at who they had available to lead 10 level designers for X-Men Legends 2. And they said, okay, well, we have not trained anybody to even be a senior level designer. We have nobody who has experience in this sort of a role. Nobody who has skills, any sort of training. So my impression of how this went about, and this may be skewed in the foggy mists of history, but they printed out the employee roster and started at A and said, could this person lead a team of level designers? What about this person? And eventually they got down to me, and they're like, well, Keith works with level designers. Let's ask him. Hey, Keith, do you want to lead a team of level designers? Okay. And that was my leadership training, and I was now responsible for 10 people who weren't even from my discipline, right? Like, it would be silly enough for me to be in charge of 10 programmers being a programmer. Being in charge of 10 level designers when I don't even know how to use the level editor, that's pants on head bonkers. So I became a design manager because they didn't want to call me a lead designer because there were actual lead designers in the company elsewhere. And it would have been politically unsightful to give me the same title that they did. So they're like, oh, yeah, I don't know, but he manages them. A design manager. So that was my title.
That's interesting. In the actual credits for both of those games, it says design lead. So that's somebody didn't tell the people who made the credits, I guess.
Yeah, well, sometimes you use words and other people don't understand why
Yeah.
you use them. And so they just insert synonyms as they see fit.
So what kind of was your role or your responsibilities as a design manager?
They were a lot more like what you think of as a producer, which I was eventually titled years later. So my role was to take direction from the project lead. Hey, we're going to have 5 chapters. Here are the environments we're going to have in each of these chapters. Talk to the art department, find out when they're going to get all of your assets available for your designers to make stuff, put together a schedule, figure out which designer's doing which map, do all these sorts of things, and here's our alpha date, here's beta, all these kinds of things. So just go do all that. So it was a lot of organizing. And the great thing was, most of the people on this team had worked on the first X-Men game. And with few exceptions, everybody on our team they knew one another from working together at some point, and they were experienced. So when you add all of that together, they really didn't need a whole lot from me, which is good since I couldn't do anything to help them
Yeah.
in the level editor, um, or give them any sort of creative input, right? So that should be red instead of blue. No, that was so not my job. But hey, Keith, I'm supposed to start on the sewer maps next week, and I don't have any of the assets yet from the art team. Like that was a thing I
Okay.
could help with, right? So my tasks largely involved organizing them, interfacing with the art team, occasionally asking programmers why something was broken, asking them when we were going to get a feature in because we needed it for the boss level, these kinds of things. And then I just kind of sat back and watched all the designers do magical stuff.
That sounds like fun. That was pretty much the experience on both of those, Legends 2 and Ultimate Alliance.
Yeah, well, so Legends 2 was a fairly experienced team. Most of the people had worked together, and we hardly changed any of the technology. We really just rolled straight off of one project onto the next one. And we made it with no appreciable overtime. On on time, it was developed on time and on budget, and it was critically received really well. I think there were issues around the marketing of it, such that it didn't sell as well as it could have. But the people who played it were like, "Hey, this is a great game." So from our perspective, that was a big success, right? Well, so then we took almost exactly the same team and said, "Great, go make Marvel Ultimate Alliance." And so by now we had the rare opportunity of a group of people that have worked together for the most part on 3 projects
Yeah.
back to back to back, using the same internal language, the same implicit knowledge, largely the same technology, all these sorts of things. We had every bonus that you can ever have in game development. And so it was just fun. It was just a ton of fun going into Ultimate Alliance. We had all these ideas. Now we're like, okay, well, since we've done 2 of these, how can we really stretch some of this stuff? And that's when we were able to make um, like it's a top-down isometric game, right? But we were able to make some levels. I remember you fighting off Galactus is eating a planet, and it was pretty much just
Yeah.
a side scroller. There's a Valhalla map where you're kind of running straight down the Bifrost Bridge.
Fireballs.
Murder World, Murder World was so fun.
The Pitfall.
So because it's an Activision title, we have access to all of their intellectual properties. And so we were able to make Pitfall a map, which was the very first game by David Crane, kind of the founder of Activision. So that was huge. So it was just a ton of fun. And we were never really concerned about deadlines. We weren't concerned about working overtime. Everything we did, we enjoyed. We loved working with each other. It was just a delight.
That's really fun. Is that maybe the most fun, most enjoyable development or production that you think you've been a part of?
I think across those games, I mean, we became known
Yeah.
as the Marvel team. Like, yeah, what game is the Marvel team going to work on next? So that was great. I think I still have really fond memories of Soldier of Fortune 1 just because that was my first big budget game, right? And I was working with a whole bunch of people who were also new to the industry, and this was all new to all of us, and we couldn't believe what we got to make. So that still has a great place in my memory. But the period of years working on the Marvel titles, really fun. Like I still have great memories of all those people. We would we would still go out to lunch even after I didn't work at Raven anymore. We'd go out for a few times a year. We'd get together. Just all the memories of bonding with those folks and working on those titles. And it helps that they didn't sell poorly. Right? Like none of us have yachts, right? So that didn't happen. But they did okay, and we never had any of them canceled out from under us. Critics received them well, players received them well. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much like how does that get better? I don't know.
So between Legends 2 and Ultimate Alliance, what do you think? What's a better game? What's your favorite?
Well, so I think the big thing that we added with Ultimate Alliance was and I forget what the verbiage was in the game, but where you get to have uh, superpowers
Mm.
interacting. So like, and they, so like Iron Man can do a repulsor blast off of Captain America's shield and take out a whole room full of baddies. So like, you, depending on who you put in your team of four heroes, when they do their ultimate attack, they can interact with one another and do super crazy mega damage. And I'll point out that that attack that I just mentioned was used
Yeah,
in the Avengers
that's
movie.
true. It was. You guys get royalties for that?
So I pretty sure I haven't. That check has not come this way. But so that was one of the big things that we got a chance to add that we enjoyed. And then we got to go in depth into some of the more interesting comic book areas. So that was fun. And also at the time, we were working with Blur Studios, who is probably still one of the leading high res cinematic uh, CGI cinematic uh, companies out there. And we would pay them a ton of money to do like a 30-second cinematic in the game, but it was
I love those
amazing.
cinematics.
And at the time, we heard that they were working with Marvel to do an
Oh
Iron
wow.
Man movie. And this is way back before any of the MCU actually came out. But that was pretty exciting to be able to work with clearly a high end art house like Blur, and to even be up in this stratosphere where people are talking about, yes, well, maybe we'll do an Iron Man movie. So that was a
That's
pretty cool
really
time.
cool. I don't want us to run out of time before we get a chance to talk about your book and
Oh,
what you've been working on in the past. How long have you been doing like the coaching and consulting and all that good stuff?
sure. Well, I left Raven in 2010, so it's been about 15 years that I have been an independent consultant. So I've been doing leadership consulting and helping companies with cultural improvement, with people operations, because especially in big budget game development, software development takes a
Hmm.
toll on human beings. And if you don't lead them well, then they wind up working nights and weekends essentially for free because they're salaried and burning themselves out in the meantime. I saw that happen. It happened to me. It happened to a lot of my coworkers and friends. I think it sucks. And so I've been doing consulting for well over a decade to try and prevent that from occurring at any more places, and it
Yeah.
absolutely has to.
And Raven has since unionized, correct? Part of Raven.
Part of Raven, and this was in the news a couple years ago. So the QA team at Raven voted to unionize. And that is a small, and I haven't worked there in years, right, obviously, but that is a smaller portion of let's say 200 people. It's probably bigger than that now. Let's imagine Raven is 200 people. Maybe 15 of those are
Okay.
QA, maybe. I don't really know, but we're rough numbers, right? So when we say there is union presence at Raven,
Yeah.
technically accurate, but it's not as though the entire studio is part of a
There's still a
union.
long way to go, is what you're saying.
If unionization
Okay.
is a goal, then yes, that it is a step has been taken
Okay.
in that direction.
Do you feel like people or the industry is at all starting to kind of shift toward that? Or may not necessarily unionization, but trying to find a better approach to leadership and trading people for the jobs they want done, and or still an uphill battle.
Some places do better than others, and I am pleasantly surprised when I come across studios where they at least say the right thing and they nod at the appropriate time when I talk about treating people well. But the problem with which we're faced
Yeah.
is the capitalism. Like, it is still the case that we have to exploit game developers to make more money off of our titles. And when we have people who are all up in arms and they're flaming down the subreddits because Nintendo's talking about charging more money for the console, or somebody's talking about raising the price of a game from $60 to maybe $70. Okay, well, we have 30,000 game developers who've been laid off in the past couple of years. And that's because the game companies at the top of the food chain aren't making enough money to keep all of those developers. And you're telling me that we can't afford to pay more than $60 a game. Well, then we're just going to keep seeing layoffs, and we're going to keep seeing the exploitation of people who are fortunate to remain employed. So it really is the capitalism. So until we are using, I don't know, the barter system, I would like to play Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, please. Here's a bushel of wheat.
Yeah.
Like, until we have that as a replacement for capitalism, I think we're still going to run into these issues.
I mean, obviously, as consumers, we don't want more expensive games, but that's probably the best solution to make sure. Would you say, to make sure that everybody at all levels is actually getting paid and not?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get it. Who wants to pay more for anything? Like, not me. I understand. And we have the issue that, so when I was working at Activision, the CEO was Bobby Kotick. And Bobby Kotick made something like $30 million a year. And he famously made the statement in the news at one point in time, I want to take the fun out of video game development.
He said that.
He said that with his mouth words. And the thing is, we can point to any number of problems that have gone wrong with the industry in general, and specifically at Activision-owned studios, as a result of Mr. Kotick's practices. Because of all of those things, because he would cover up sexual harassment issues at studio head level, because he would inflame misogynistic practices, because he would happily exploit game developers, he received bonuses on top of his $30 million salary. The system said, you're doing a fantastic job, sir. And by the standards of capitalism, they're right. So until, I mean, I don't want to have to pay more money for a game, but you know what? Even if I pay twice as much for a game, I bet I know who's going to get that money.
That's true. We probably need, it could be all thought. It seems like Larian Studios is very much about kind of treating their employees well. Hopefully that's true. I've never been there, but we probably need more places like that succeeding for people to start maybe turning heads and saying, hey, maybe there's some method to that madness over there.
You know what? It's great to hear every time you see any stuff like that show up in the news. Those I'd certainly rather hear that than the opposite, right? But the thing is, the basis for comparison that we have in the games industry is so bad That it's like, hey man, I joined this new studio and it's fantastic. They treat us so well. When the boss comes by, he never sticks a fork in your eye. Good? Right? Like
Yeah.
that's the standard for what determines if a game studio is treating their people well. Like that's the bar. The bar is painted on the floor in hell. And so many companies have trouble actually achieving that. So, yay for Larian and anybody else out there that is doing, good with the capital G. But we have a ways to go.
Let's hope we get there. We're already running a little over on time, so I will say thank you again for speaking with me. This is Beyond Critical. This is your book. It was a really cool read. I don't work in the games industry, let alone have a leadership position in it, but it was still really cool and a lot of cool insights, and I think a lot of it sort of just applies to general just improvement of the self. So I think it's really cool. And
excellent. Thank you for bringing it up. Thank you for buying it. My son still needs braces, so that's going to help. And I wrote that thing well over a decade ago, so I'd be embarrassed to even read it. But I appreciate that you and possibly my mom have read a copy of that.
Thank you so
much.
You have a great day.
Yeah, my pleasure. Take care, Jacob.